Dear friends, good afternoon. It is a great pleasure for me to be here among old friends. It's a great responsibility to be here in front of our mentors, and it is a great honor to be here on this stage presenting you the experience on our country, which is also a small country with all the challenges of the small country and all the success of the small country. I will try to describe our journey implementing interoperability and data exchange. I was supposed to discuss exclusively on that topic. I will deep dive into how we implemented and why we implemented data exchange as we implemented it. But I will bring a little bit of context, how we started and what was our starting point, and you will find a lot of similarities between our countries. Because we have, of course, we have kind of same legacy. We started in 2010, roughly 7 years ago, when we seriously started to think about electronic governance. We had a lot of discussions with our colleagues within the public sector, exactly as this kind of events, which is organized today in Kiev, in Ukraine. And we started to debate what journey, what kind of roadmap for us to develop. Of course, we had to pay attention to other countries' experience, but what was distinct from I mean, each country is different, and what was distinct in our case, we had quite a good infrastructure, but we didn't have any content. So we had a lot of investment, we made a lot of investment into networking, a lot of investment into securing systems, but in fact, we didn't have what to secure. We didn't have a digital content, we didn't have enough services, we didn't have streamlined business processes which really help people. So we asked World Bank to help us with money, because we didn't have even enough money at that point in time to start this particular development. And World Bank was kind enough to offer us a startup kind of budget for us to launch this process. It's just for kicking off this process. So 7 years after, we have a environment which can speed up development of electronic services, can streamline electronic services, and can really bring the real value to our citizens, to our businesses. But what was common to most of the governments, we had to define kind of strategy, kind of vision. I have to say that each and every time when we discussed different topics in e-governance, including the strategy for e-government, we have to confess we didn't understand each and every time what these terms mean. And we do not understand now at all times why to use a particular technology in this particular context, why to pay attention to some hype terms or tendencies while we don't have a real application in the government. But we decided for ourselves to start just with enough strategy. This government decision is probably 12 or 13 pages long, not too long to draw attention from, to deviate attention from the core direction of our development, but among them is data exchange and interoperability. This strategy stated as in case of Ukraine, as we heard today, by 2020 to digitize all public services. And we tried to do it our own, again, original way. So there are two ways to make all public services digital. First one is to digitize all public services. And secondly, to diminish or to eliminate a lot of public services so you will get to the equal number of services and electronic services. So we started to move from both ends. So in parallel to digitizing things, we started to rationalize services, to modernize, to re-engineer them in such a way, to rethink them in such a way that obsolete services, services overlapping, they get eliminated. And the remaining services will have to be digitized. Very soon we found that we are not ready to digitize all the services, since a service in our vision is not just a web application in a web browser window with fancy user experience. It needs a lot of infrastructures around it. And during these 7 years, we developed all these infrastructure. First of all, security. How we can make sure who is on the other end of the line. So this is probably one of the quintessential questions when you start developing electronic services. Electronic services sometimes lead to legal consequences. So you'll have to make sure who is exactly your client. Secondly, if you are interacting with electronic content, you have somehow to legally bind that content. So those electronic transactions you made over internet, they have to be legally binded. Otherwise, they will be disconsidered by public officers. Third, you need electronic payments. Why? Do not to stay in line for a service itself, but to stay in line to pay for that service. So we had to develop a payment infrastructure or electronic payment infrastructure in such a way that people will instantly access the service and pay the service. Of course, electronic messages. We don't want anymore to stay and wait for 3 days or 4 days a letter, enveloped letter from a ministry to another ministry, which is probably a kilometer away one from each other, because the bureaucracy works this way. Now the citizens are working on, they are all present in social media everywhere, so why we do not pay attention to these communication channels? So we have to reinvent the messaging infrastructure, how government discuss with citizens. Of course, because the electronic services, they are electronic, that means they are working 24 hours around, we have to offer them a reliable and secure environment for them to be hosted in a secure, reliable, with always available mode, in always available mode. That's why we started to build an infrastructure, an cloud-based infrastructure, a private governmental cloud, and we were, this is without any kind of, sorry, I will not be that modest, but we were the first country in the ex-USSR region implementing the cloud at the national scale. We were the only country included in a EU report, along with EU member countries, in all the studies for the cloud. And our standing is not that bad in those reports and those analyses. So we have to have a reliable infrastructure to host things. I will come to cloud principles a little bit later, because they are following us everywhere, including in data exchange processes. And of course, you have to have data exchange. You have to have data exchange. Otherwise, you will create, so your services will be a nightmare for all of your citizens. They will be forced to bring one paper from one official country to counter to another one, and so on and so forth, collecting papers, making them postmans and things like that. And because we have to save those hundreds of years of time for our taxpayers, we have to put in place a reliable and interesting data exchange platform. Of course, we have to deliver things or deliver physical goods if your electronic services ends up with a physical deliverable. And of course, you have to make sure you are supporting your clients, both parties, those who are using your services and those who are providing your services. You have to teach them how to correctly use and how to correctly provide. So apparently, kind of small service, a small web application, a governmental application, but it needs all this infrastructure to function efficiently. But if we simplify this picture, there are two core infrastructures which has to be put in place. Otherwise, you cannot talk about e-governance, at least efficient e-governance. That's electronic identity. It was stated so many times today, and data exchange. Without electronic identity, you will not be able to conduct legally binding operations remotely, and that's a key. And without data exchange, your services will be impossible to deliver because of the complexity and because of the tons of documents you will have to collect. The heavy artillery of this infrastructure are these two infrastructures, like cloud computing and interoperability. And I will try to explain exactly how we decided and how we implemented it. But first of all, I have to say that we branded all these products because, as our friends from Estonia said, a name means something. That's kind of motto every person will associate with that particular thing. So for payment, we have M-Pay. For identity, for instance, for letting people use different information systems, we have M-Pass. So pass, please go on, so log in. For sign, M-Sign, and so on and so forth. For data exchange, for that platform which connects different data sources in one single data space, that's M-Connect. And for cloud, that is, of course, it's M-Cloud. So M-Connect. M-Connect is a data exchange platform which is built on several principles. I will talk to you about that a little bit later. But it transforms, literally transforms situation from a typical situation in governments, which looks like this initially, where we have a lot of mess, a lot of bidirectional communication. And that means we have to support and we have to understand, and more importantly, we have to depend on one of each other, technically, legally, contractually. And because the governments, including our governments, is in a constant morphing, transformation, reorganization, reform, that is a weakness, because otherwise you will have to re-sign contracts with each new organization. Just to bring an example from my country, a couple of months ago, we had 16 ministries. Now we have 9. We had, a couple of months ago, we had 34 inspection bodies, inspection authorities. Now we have 13. So, of course, if we will have to depend on each other, we will have to re-sign things, we will have to reconnect things, and so on and so forth. This is not appropriate, and this is not probably the best way to do to spend the time in the government. So we are moving from this model to a more flexible model, we call it, where we have a common platform, a common environment, where people or different institutions can get connected and can communicate with each other through some middleware, through some buses, so through some message buses or event buses. So conceptually, we are moving this from that picture to this picture. And here are the principles of this movement. First of all, we apply data source abstraction. For us, as a consumer of some public data, really, I don't have to know who exactly is producing some particular data. I don't have to know what institution is that, how they keep the data, what is their backup policy, availability policies, things like that. I have to know that 3 things. Data exists, it is available. I have to make sure that it is authentic, so it doesn't come from untrusted sources. And I have to make sure, and I have to be confident that it is consistent. So I can take my decisions based on that particular data. That's data source abstraction. And this decouples, we don't sign anymore, today we don't sign anymore bilateral data exchange contracts. That's one thing. The second one is non-invasive system interconnection. What does that mean? For me to connect 2 different information systems, which, by the way, were built at different point in time, with different skills, different teams, level of documentation, sounds familiar, yeah, for many of government bodies. To interconnect them, I will have at least to change one of them to make sure it understands the second. In our case, we are adapting to those existing systems' capabilities. Why? Because of how the government works. Government will tell a little bit about that as well. I've told about data abstraction. If we look from consumer perspective, the only thing, or the data consumer perspective, the only thing I have to know is there is somewhere data which I have to access, which I have to use for my business processes, and I have some interfaces to that. I get authenticated, and that's it. I don't have to think about who exactly produced that data. But of course, this data is being produced somewhere, and that's why we have this non-invasive systems integration. That's because we are leaving information systems as they are. If they have some capability to get connected, then we use those. If they don't, we invent or we apply components. We apply those components which are directly connecting to data. It's not a recommended, all the time recommended measure, but it helps a lot in saving time in integrating systems. Of course, we can transform data from one format to another, from one semantic format even to another, through data mediation. And we, of course, we have to keep the journaling and all the tracking information in place. We are doing exactly that. With private government cloud, we need that particular portability, as I said. That's why we hosting most of information systems in the cloud. That's not absolutely necessary for data exchange, but that's a huge plus, because hosting information systems in the cloud absolve those ministries, agencies who are weak in IT capacities to operate and administer those information systems. So keeping them in the cloud, you have this portability and this kind of freedom to move them, the workload around, including in the public. I've already told about software-defined data exchange. About the technology stack, we use some open source technology. We use some proprietary technology for persistence. And we use some homemade, let's say, components for journaling, for authentication, which Alexander presented today as your immediate plans. Such components we developed and are using too. And of course, we use, the last one is especially important. When we are saying about data exchange, we are talking about data exchange. It is not necessary to understand that this is data exchange between information systems of different governmental organizations. It's not necessary that. It may be data exchange between government bodies, even between those who don't have even an information system. And believe me, we have some of such. We had a Ministry of Youth and Sport. They don't have even one single IT guy there. So, and that's kind of typical situation in most of small agencies, but that's the situation. So for those who don't have what to integrate into mConnect, we provide them with a window, we name it mAccess, which literally gives you access to the whole spectrum of data sources in the government. What we are going to do next, and what we are working on right now, is to make mConnect fully cloud, to explore the full potential of the cloud by making all the components of this data exchange platform self-served. I mean, to be able to self-serve, not to ask for someone to interconnect you and things like that. I mean, to benefit from declaration of data formats and things. And to be able to implement this complete multi-tenancy. Also, today, and Yannick also mentioned that, and Alexander mentioned events, live events, different live events. We want to be more proactive with our services. That's why we need more event-based data exchange. Event-based data exchange would mean if a child gets born, then authorities who have to be aware about this event are immediately notified. We don't expect those authorities to come in, to log in, and to ask. Maybe someone came to me for allowances, for instance, for different incentives. So we immediately start to think about offering them those services. And of course, we now, also with support of the World Bank, we still don't have money. That amount of money we need for all this transformation. We are rethinking governmental services. I will skip several slides just for the sake of being short, because I guess it's too risky to stand between you and lunch. But this means that literally in our vision, how we are going to use and to consume data is to access a semantic catalog, which is in fact a registry of all metadata in the governmental space about everything, individuals, legal entities, real estate, vehicles, animals, whatever, and pick the data sets you need, and submit a form, and the authority who is in charge of allowing you exactly to, authorizing you that access will immediately give you, based on some policies, will immediately give you a green light or will deny your access to those sources if you are not allowed by law to do so. In terms of modernizing services, this is probably the last slide from me. That's now we're in a position with all these platforms, with all this experience, we're in a position to rethink public services. So we literally, in the government of Moldova, in e-government center, which is the CIO of the government, we said we will put on hold all digitizations. We will not digitize anymore any service before we will re-engineer them, before we will rethink them. We don't want to create today problems for tomorrow. We want now to stop, rethink, and move with a new enterprise approach to all the services, with everything integrated. That's why we broke the CIO office into several divisions. And there is a colleague of mine which is responsible, and his title is Chief Engineering Officer in the government of Moldova. My title is Chief Digitization Officer, so responsible for digitization part of it. But I will not start any and will not give green light to any of digitization processes prior to re-engineering, prior to green light from my colleague, which has to deliver me exact outputs, legislative basis, specifications, and things like that. And of course, now to set this up in law, not just in government decisions, we prepared the draft law on data exchange and interoperability. It couldn't be more explicit than that. To be approved by Parliament and to be promoted to be implemented, to be followed by all bodies. So that's a package of legal acts which is in final stages of approval within the government, and lately will go to the Parliament. So I would finish with thanks to other countries which we learned from, and especially a special thanks to Estonia, since we learned a lot of from this country experience and from these people experience, because they are now good friends of ours, and probably in the coffee break I will ask Arvo if we were good students learning from him. Thank you very much.